Hello, and welcome to American Amnesia. I'm Cliff Garner, your host, and I've been away for a while. I had a lot of other things coming up, including getting a new pad. I lost my old one, and this is on my replacement one. I'm testing this out, kind of a beta, but at the same time, I'm wanting to get some things out. A lot of things have been happening. I have been aware of this, kind of watching it closely, and some things I found rather interesting. I've been very interested in this Q anonymous stuff, although I don't know if I buy it all, but there does seem to be something to at least some of it. There may be a certain amount of disinformation going on through it, but there's something going on there, and it's interesting, and I do want to dig into that in a little bit more detail. I also want to go over that executive order that's been recently put out, the executive order blocking the property of persons involved with serious human rights abuse or corruption. I want to look at that fairly close. That'll probably be what I do next. Next installment or somewhere around that. But it's fascinating, and I think that there's a certain amount of truth in what's coming out in the Q anonymous information regarding that. There are some things that are remarkable here when you look at really kind of look at it with a longer view. People are arguing about Mueller. He's bad, he's good, he's bad, he's good. The Republicans complain, the Democrats scream to retain him, and it just seems to me like it's such a I hate to say it, but it's a shit show that It seems to me like it's almost been manufactured. It's I think quite funny, because the way that Trump has proven to be able to manipulate really the press and to take their strengths and use them against them, that he has probably done something along this lines. Miller, I would guess, as a if he is an honorable person, as I'm suspecting that he is, because you get people like Gowdy that swears that the guy, so he's all right, he's upright. That when you really look at the long run, what he probably agreed to is, it's like, okay, I'll take a look and see what you got. We'll make sure that you are honest. And I think that he's proven that. I'm actually befuddled that they haven't found anything in the business stuff. Not necessarily about Russia. In fact, I really doubt Russia altogether. I did at the beginning. I do now. It's just one of those things. This is the Democratic Party in its projection, because of really Obama, and even more so with Hillary Clinton, and then the legal monies that she has taken, and on all this, that her collusion with Russia is probably much higher. And they probably would have rather worked with her. I'm serious. They probably would have preferred it. She's so crooked. The blackmail potential is uncalculable. So I think I think it's pretty obvious that their choice wasn't him. It was her. And because of that, I think that the whole thing is a shit show. I really do. And it goes beyond that. I've been watching it all from the very beginning, and with what came out with WikiLeaks, they've never shown that there was a hacking as such. And if there was, it was spearfishing done to Podesta because of his own stupidity and his choice of a password, and the fact that he got spearfished in the first place, and then he didn't change it. What can you do? What can you do with people like this? They belong in prison. Just for the sheer stupidity of how they run things. Just unbelievable. But at any rate, I think that one of the things that keeps coming out is that Mueller has been exonerating Trump, actually. I think that he came in as a skeptic, and now he's become a believer. And now I think we're starting to see all these, there's so many of these indictments that have not been opened. They're sealed indictments sitting all around the country, just waiting to be put into place. Yeah, I think something's definitely afoot, and I think that the whole net is spread so wide, and it's spread within certain parameters that I think that it's going to be a very serious sting, and I think the words "greatest sting in history" apply. So I do think that there is something coming down, and I think it's really not going to be a very pleasant one for the Democrats. Their people have been just unbelievable. Corruption. All kinds of sex crimes. We're not even going to talk about the pedophilia right away, but just the amount of quasi-legal and actually even illegal attacks on women. Just incredible. It's incredible. It's one of those things I've watched for years, ever since I quit drinking in 1999, I watched the behavior of people like Al Franken and stuff, and they strike me like abusive drunks, and I have the feeling that that's really a serious problem. And I don't doubt that there's Republicans. There have been. Dennis Hastert, for one. But he's pals with the Podestas. He went traveling with those guys. Do you think for a minute they were sitting in their hotel rooms talking about Dennis out pounding on little boys, and they weren't helping him? I don't think so. I think they share the same disgusting entertainments, if you want to call it that. So, where's this going? There's a lot of pedophiles getting arrested too, all over the world. They're just everywhere. Thailand. England, France, all through Scandinavia, Canada, Hong Kong, just everywhere. Yeah, something's going on. Saudi Arabia had pretty much a purge. House of Saud's still in, but it's only one branch. And they're cleaning up. They're busting out the pedophiles. It's about time. And one of these weird things that just came through in the news, Diyanet, the religious bureau in Turkey, has okayed child marriages as young as, I think it's 9 years old, which is same age as Aisha, Muhammad's child bride that he was thighing to prepare her for his bed. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of reformist-minded mullahs and teachers, imams in Turkey, who think that really it needs to be put in its own context of its own time. I think that they're right, and I think a lot of the Turks would agree with that. But with Erdogan and his rage to bring about his new caliphate, they want to bring that back. Just like some people who think that we should never have gotten rid of polygamy and the multiple marriages, according to the Bible. Well, there's a reason for it, and it was to put things into a different time. What was allowed at one time is not really acceptable today. And why? Well, because people are getting better. You hope. So, at any rate, there are theological reasons on that, and theological basics, and those are things that we can talk about another time. I do intend to go into issues pertaining to Turkey more often, and it's something that's part of my background and expertise from having lived there for so long. And really all I have to do is just kind of read the news for a couple days, and I'm pretty much caught up. Things have not gotten that far away from what I saw. They've just kind of mutated a little bit more towards Erdogan, towards the dictator. But there's a lot of people that are not backing him. He doesn't need them to run the country, and he doesn't need them to do anything to persecute them anyhow. I mean, he's just the way it is. So that kind of brings us up to what I want to get around to today. Basically, I want to talk about Iran and some of the things regarding what's going on right now. When Obama came into power as the president in the U.S., he really did sit on his laurels for the first couple years with a lot of his foreign policy. He made his decision on Afghanistan after a lot of hemming and hawing. That went on in 2009, of course. That was his first year as president. Then he refused to back the Iranian uprising at the time, and they were slaughtered in the streets, and that was a shame. It wouldn't have taken much from him, especially from him, if you think about it, for a lot of different reasons, but mainly because he was brand new. He was the first black president of the United States. There were rumors that he was Muslim. I disagree with that, but the people do make a good case, citing taqiyya, which is holy lying, which is a function. Actually, it's a functional part of Muslim theology. Some religions have this feature. I think perhaps the Hare Krishnas were probably known best for it, but they weren't the only ones. There were many others that have done this. So it's not like it's new or that unusual. I mean, the Moonies did too. A lot of cults are real fond of that concept, and there was that aspect of holy lying that, depending on the context, has been a feature of certain religious beliefs. Christianity never adhered to it. I think that comes from the idea of Christ saying, "Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Do not swear by anything, but be honest, but tell the truth. Truth is important. Satan is a liar and a destroyer from the beginning." So you have this Christian bias that we kind of in the West have. It affects our lens and interpretation of the world very strongly. And so when you tell people that Islam does not teach that, well, they're like, well, they're the same in other ways. Why shouldn't they be that way? Well, because it explicitly says that. So the willingness of far too many people to ignore what is clearly in print in the Quran, for example, is a part of the problem that we have in the West. They just will not even look, and it's because they're afraid of what they'll see, and that is a problem. As far as it goes, I think most Muslims are actually rather decent folks that aren't really quite capable of living up to the idea of stabbing everybody in the back to forward jihad. You know, especially when the idea of jihad takes many different forms, and the one that they're using, the radicals are using, is indeed a valid theological position, and to ignore that fact is to ignore what Islam is. It would be just like recognizing, as I do, the mercy and grace of Christianity without recognizing the fact that there are people that can twist it into a judgmental and violent system, with the Inquisition and everything else involved with it too. That is a valid point to point out, but it is also needed to be reminded that that is not what it says in the book, not in the New Testament. It's actually come from a misapplication of the old after the new. And so we have to be honest and look at honest things and deal with the honest facts, and to not recognize that there's a twisting of the gospel that does occur, and people do that with judgmentalism, is to misrepresent what's actually there. This has been done. This is a problem. This is probably what Antichrist is actually the breakdown of the Christian faith into what it should not be. And there's always this problem of the good and the evil growing side by side. Christ said that himself. So that theological issue in Christianity is paralleled by the fact that the book does say that in Islam. And there's reasons why. And we can get into those some other time. I've talked with GK from like Flint about this, and I've wanted to do an issue, probably a series on this subject alone, because I think that is really where we're coming to the true apocalypse. Where does it break down? Well, it probably wouldn't even be noticed, except by a few that would actually recognize the fact that this element of violent judgmentalism is not condoned in the Bible, and it isn't. Not in the New Testament. You can't show it to me. There's people, the Hebrew rooters, that are trying to twist it, and they've been doing a rather interesting job, and one of the reasons why I've come out against it. But that is something that is pretty important. But meanwhile, we have this situation going on in Iran, and Obama didn't do anything, even though he himself, because of his unique position, not only that, his newness, could have really have done something to maybe assuage some of the worst of it, and but instead he allowed a greater murder, a greater bloodbath to occur because he didn't do anything. And that you know, there's a certain amount of blame that I put on him for that. There's also a certain amount of understanding that I have towards getting it. When I was here in the States and we went to war in Iraq, I was all for it. And really the WMD wasn't even the issue. It was more of an issue of actually, if they would have fulfilled the promises they made to the people of Iraq, that it would have probably have been a great thing. But they didn't do that. And they made a point of not doing it pretty much from the beginning of the occupation. Even though they were hunting down Saddam and everything else. There was a lot of hoopla on this and that. And you know, and I was still for it. And when I went overseas, I started seeing things from another angle. And especially when I got to Turkey and I started talking to people from Iraq and from Afghanistan and people who had been there and seen what they saw. And a lot of Kurds really that I had talked to. They weren't afraid to tell what they thought about it, and they weren't terribly happy with all the results. Now, the Kurds were pretty happy with the possibility of gaining their autonomy, and that was a kind of a I suppose a carrot that was put before them, but it was never quite fulfilled. In fact, it still hasn't been, but it could yet happen. The northern regions of Iraq are very Kurdish, and their independence is pretty well acknowledged, which is kind of good actually. But it's also kind of a monkey wrench in world politics right at the moment. But the thing is that with the people from there, they wanted to know why. And you have to kind of come to a point where it's like, I really don't have an answer. I really don't have an answer for you. And I don't know that I can justify what they did. And when you come to that point, you're looking at a person who really wants to know. And you can't answer them that question. Then you have to come to the conclusion maybe it was best not to have done it in the first place. So there's that issue. And so I understand to a certain extent why Obama would let those people be in that position. But with what developed after that, there is no justification. None at all. Because he expanded war into so many places. See, that was the thing. I don't know. I don't know at what point he abandoned whatever principles he may have had when he got there. My suspicion is, and it came pretty much once I started seeing him with the Arab Spring especially, about 2010, about a year later, that with all that going on the way it did, that he almost had to have been CIA. And that to some extent, the developments were pretty much as he wanted them. And he kept looking for this deal with Iran. He always wanted to make a deal with them, even with Ahmadinejad and being such a nutcase. That leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And I met a lot of Iranians when I was over there in Turkey. And they were just wonderful people. I worked with them. I worked with Iranian Americans, but I also worked with Iranians who had just come from Iran, many of whom spoke very good English. And some very wonderful people that I worked with. And also some just really nice people that I met. Beautiful women. And most of them really didn't care for the mullahs, but they didn't care for the way we were acting towards their country. And that applied in a lot of ways. And I met a lot of people at the church that came from Iran. And they had become Christians either before they left or while they were in Turkey. And I watched a lot of them become baptized and taught and trained in the faith. I got to know a few of them a little bit. And most of them eventually went back. And this is something that I don't think that the dictators can even fathom, is that they're, and when they do, it's probably actually too late to understand it, but there is a huge number of Christians, and I would dare say an even greater number of crypto Christians, people who are secretly Christian, in Iran, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon. Lebanon, there's a large Christian community, but there's probably, I'd say, a fairly large number of not just newly converted, but secret Christians who are known well as Muslims, but they secretly are Christian. That, I think, is a fact that they are very afraid of. And in Iran, it has grown exponentially. And that I understand that there are two other faiths that are rather strong and are also growing, but Christianity in particular is strong. The old Mazdaean religion of Iran, the Zoroastrian faith, Zarathustran, however you want to put it, Zardusht. I believe that's the proper pronunciation in Kurdish. That this faith is making a comeback also, and that the mullahs are afraid because fewer people like being Muslim anymore. And it's because they've forced the headscarf and the puritanical version that they've promoted in particular, and with the strict rules and everything else. People behind closed doors are just nuts. I've talked to gay guys that have gone over there, and they're like, oh, there's no lack for fun. It's dangerous. There is a death penalty. And for people who want to make Islam into a quasi-Marxist kind of free love kind of thing, sorry. You lose. You don't know what's going on. Better open your eyes, pal. Take a look around. And that brings me to the next point with the feminists. The feminists are not speaking out on this. This is a shame. This is to their shame. And I'm not talking about certain of the first, second wave mentality. I mean, that has been really absorbed by the culture here in the U.S. You have to consider this, that actually feminism, third and fourth wave feminism, were valid. They would probably acknowledge the fact that they won, and that they would be more vigilant about not letting things go backwards, and that they would actually try to heal the wounds between the sexes now, but they're not doing that. It's too much of a political game, and there's too much at stake for certain people, and that they want to basically turn everything on its head, and this intersectionality and all that nonsense. It's dying. It's dying. Because they should be out there supporting the women that are out there in the streets in Iran right now. There is no way they should ignore them. They shouldn't ignore the women of the third world, and particularly of Muslim countries, and abandon them to the cruelties of strict legalistic religion. Again, we go back to our interpretation in the West is flavored by our Christianity, that Christendom that's residual. And that residual fact of Christian lenses through which we look at the world through retains that idea of mercy and the brotherhood of man and things like this. These are not, they don't make sense in Islam, and they shouldn't. You're asking too much from people of another faith to bend to your wishes. Instead, they'll snicker up their sleeve and do what they want. And since they have a taqiyya, they're able to get away with a lot more too. So the fact is that you guys are boondoggled. You're bamboozled. You're totally ignorant of what's going on, and you refuse to open your eyes and actually see it because you have this lens in front of your face, and your first world problems are whiny. Sorry, nobody wants to hear it. This is further discrediting. This is a trend that has happened since the Clinton era in the 90s, that the left sold out to a political party and didn't get anything in return ideologically. And really, for good reason. The left wasn't what it was. There's a reason that Abbie Hoffman killed himself. He was really depressed. And I think that he was seeing the future of the left and the fact that it was actually irrelevant. And it was becoming a tool of the people that he didn't think it should have been a tool of. And that's exactly what happened. So the feminists, third, fourth wave feminists, they're lost. First and second wave, they're part of the culture. Come in from the cold people. 2013, there's another point. This goes back to Obama. Obama wanting to make that deal with Iran. He finally did it. He did it. But he threw so much overboard in order to get it. And Erdogan of Turkey, this is why Zarab, Z-A-R-A-B, he is such an important case. Keep an eye on him. He knows where the bodies are buried. In fact, he's the one that buried a lot of them. He was Erdogan's boy. He was the go-between between Erdogan and Ahmadinejad, who was running the Revolutionary Guard, who are the people who were Al-Quds, right? They're the ones that are oppressing these young people in the streets in Iran right now. They fell out of favor when Ahmadinejad lost out on being the prime minister. And Zarab was arrested in America because he and Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, the ruler now, president now of Turkey, had an under the table deal in which Turkey was buying oil from Iran. Oh yeah. They were breaking the embargo that the U.S. had on Iran all that time. And it had been there in place for years. The Bush, I think it actually went back to Clinton. But during that time of Obama being there, he looked the other way as Erdogan was making billions in shoe boxes. Check YouTube. Erdogan. Put it in. Erdojan. Erdogan. Right? But it's pronounced Doan. The G is silent. Erdogan, shoeboxes, money. And you can find that they have translated versions of it in which he is talking to his son and he says, "Daddy, how do I get rid of all the money in the shoeboxes?" And he tells him where to put it. The real estate, sports complexes, resorts. Oh yeah, he had definite designs for all that money. It's billions of dollars. It's there. Just look it up. I'll put it on one of my programs one of these days. It's hilarious, but it's true. And they caught it. And he started saying, "Oh, none of that happened," and he shut down Twitter for a while. Oh yeah, he's a real piece of work. Type dictator. And he took a lot of that money he was sending to Iran and he passed it through the gold market. In fact, he paid in gold. And there was so much of a bubble that this created that it caused the gold market to tank in December 2013. And it was in the papers. Go ahead and check. Check the economic papers about it, about the gold market and Zarab and Erdogan, the Iran embargo. Check it out. There's not a whole lot after the initial news. They shut that down so fast, and the reason they did is because Obama wanted a deal with Iran. He wanted to send all that money on those skids in all those different denominations and in gold bullion. That was more important to him than the people of Iran, the safety of the people in the rest of the world, because that actually has enabled Iran to pretty much swallow up most of Iraq. Oh yeah. Such a dirty deal. And it wasn't even a good one. Yeah, I'm glad Trump shot that down. I'm glad he did. They're going to listen to him. They're going to at least be afraid of him. And you know something? That's good. Your enemy should have a certain amount of fear of your leader. They won't have respect. They should be afraid of him. They respect him. They might not fear him so much. Matter of fact, maybe they'll be willing to deal. And even if they are afraid, so what? It brings them to the table. And some of them might have to knock them out. Hate to sound so blunt, but you know something? That's what politics is. When diplomacy ends, that is where war comes from. It doesn't take a whole lot of economics or anything else getting in the middle of it. The fact is that diplomacy, no diplomacy, big problem. Anything goes. So you want to maintain diplomacy. And a good way to maintain diplomacy is to have respect. And if you don't get respect, at least a little bit of fear. Fear is good. That's what the little dictator over there in North Korea is trying to get. He wants respect. He wants to sit at the table with the big boys. He's not going to get there. China won't let him, for one. They've used him to good effect but he's also, and when I lived there, I found this out. He's also something that can be a real big problem to them, and they won't put up with it. I think they've done a few incursions in there before, and I think it had a lot to do with refugees. Go figure. And I think they've actually sent troops in, gone over the border, and actually settled things down. I'm not exaggerating. I do believe that that's what's happened there. It doesn't take a whole lot of troops to walk through, especially if they're as well trained as Chinese troops are. Oh yeah. I don't think the little dictator and his father or grandfather, any of them, were stupid enough to maybe try to take on China and all its weight. I think they recognize that as being a delegation to say, hey, cool your jets. Oh yeah. I dare say it. So, all that money, all the nonsense that Obama had to do the Iran deal over, it wasn't worth it. I don't think any of us would agree that it is. I'm going to cut it short. Well, maybe not short. A little longer than I hoped, but shorter than usual. So until next time, I'll talk to you later.